Hello, Pak Joris. Just wondering if you're already in the Zoom
Ya, sudah
now.
baik. Saya sudah ada di sini.
I see. Thank you. So maybe we can start within 1 minute.
Oke, Bu, makasih.
Nafil, you here already, yeah? Hello, Pak Nafil. How are
Hi.
you? No,
Hello, Prof. Yes, I'm here. How are you doing?
good. I hope you feel better now. I mean,
Yeah,
your condition.
yeah, getting better. Thank you. How
Okay.
are you doing?
Yeah. So yeah, we already have the full participant here. So I think we can start now, Pak Yoris. Okay.
Sure, Bu, silakan.
Oke, terima kasih. Thank you. Selamat malam from Semarang. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants, and especially to our special guest lecturer tonight, Bapak Joris van Etten, as the country operation head of Asian Development Bank. Thank you very much, Pak Yoris. I know you are very busy and really appreciate your commitment to allocate times for as a part of our epoch in evolutionary planning of the capital habitat 45 is Nusantara planning and design competitions. We are happy to have you here represent ADB and sharing a very important aspect on development, that is the financing, yeah, Pak Yoris. And yeah, this is part of our collaboration with Mars Architect. We have Pak Neville here with us, and also with the support of our colleague Pak Ruko Setiadi and me from the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Diponegoro University. And I'm happy to announce also we have some support from the government of the Netherlands as well. Yeah, before we pass the floor to you, just want to brief inform that we have closed the registration for the competitions. I don't know, Pak Neville, can we announce the number of total participants or not?
Yeah, I think we can. We are at 49 teams, so that's a
Yeah,
decent number.
yeah, from different countries. So I'm happy that we have quite impressive numbers for to joining our competitions, including from Indonesia for sure. And we hope to have innovative ideas, to promote the forest city concept in our new capital sometimes in the future, Nusantara. Okay, without further ado, I would like to invite Pak Neve if maybe you have also a short remark before we hand it over to Pak Yoris tonight. Please, Pak Neve.
Normally, I do. In this case, I would almost want to be very honest that even, with the 25-year planning career, the urban financing is still a mystery to me how it works. I've tried to understand it at various occasions, but it is difficult, and it seems also extremely site-specific. The context in China is certainly the one that I understand better, and has very different from what we're facing in Nusantara. So I'm very interested to hear how financing here, both global financing, but I'm assuming increasingly private financing will play a role in the future of the capital city.
Yeah, exactly. It's a similar situation with me. So we look forward, Pak Yoris, to give your insight based on your professional experience. So yeah, I think it's time for us, Pak Neville, to hand it over to Pak Yoris. So floor is yours, Pak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ibu Wiwin and Pak Neville. Much appreciated for the invitation. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. Way back when I started my career, I was with the Institute for Housing and Urban Development Studies. lecturing there on urban planning, what makes a city, urban management. And there already I got very excited about the financing part. And I've been lucky in my career to kind of move into that direction, from training capacity development on the topic of cities to move into actual now the side of where financing sits and where financing can be provided. Because of course, key is always in how to, you can dream up plans, but if you cannot find the financing for that, you are not going very much further on that. Now, this topic is especially super relevant given all the noise which is happening in Indonesia at the moment with respect to budget cuts or budget rationalization. That is not only in Jakarta in terms of its impact for institutions such as Ministry of Public Works, but also the National Capital Authority. But it's also very much impacting local governments. And that is a big difference from the cuts we saw at the beginning of the Jokowi era. This time, the transfers to local governments have really substantially decreased. And that really, I'd love to hear more also from other participants around the table this evening to see, if there's any impact on that, if there's any, you're already feeling it. So I very much find this topic very opportune, not only just because of the interesting case, which actually Nusantara Capital City provides us, but in general, the battle for addressing climate challenges is being won in Asia and the Pacific, and particularly in the cities of Asia and the Pacific. So ensuring that the cities have access to financing to provide sustainable solutions and innovations is really super, super important. I want to thank very much my colleague Julia, and I'll maybe also be calling in her a couple of times to support me in this lecture. She has been working with me to prepare the slides for this evening. And what we're going to talk about is actually three things. So I'll talk a little bit about ADB. I'll talk a little bit about lovability, a topic I'm very excited about, and then about financing in general, financing of cities. And then after those very brief introductions, we'll go into a case study of what ADB has done in terms of supporting the Nusantara Capital Authority to define its financing strategy for investments which could make the city more lovable. And then we'll have some time for discussion. So with that, let's move to the next slide. This picture, by the way, let's go one slide back. This picture was taken actually last Thursday of Nusantara Capital Authority when Julia and I were both part of a delegation of international agencies and embassies visiting the capital. And you see now it's really the core of the government area has really been quite developed and ready to receive inhabitants and visitors alike. Next one, please. So just a few reminders. Indeed, feel free to turn on your camera. Please also, but do turn off your microphone. Be proactive in the discussion session, and please, if you have any questions, do raise that in the chat box. We will also ask you some questions. So I don't want this to be a one-way lecture. And actually, we will ask you. So we appreciate you flipping out your phone and go to the next slide, Julia. And that is actually asking you a question about what do you know about ADB, the Asian Development Bank, and what do you think this organization does? So if you would be so kind to, with me, scan this Mentimeter, which would allow you to go to a questionnaire kind of thing, yeah? Or actually word cloud in this case. So we should go to the first one. I'm already jumping directly. In my case, it's already looking at the next question. I'm not sure if that's with others as well. But first around the question of what makes a city? Sorry, what is ADB and what does the organization do? I see in my case that I directly go to the second Mentimeter, but maybe that's my mistake. Let me just go back here. Or we can already start looking at some of the responses. Julia, please go ahead.
Wait 1 second. Can anyone see the first
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, we see now I also have it right. Who is ADB? Or what is ADB and what does the organization do?
Yeah. That is the second question, actually, for
No.
this one.
Yeah, if you refresh, you go back to the menu, you see that this is the first Mentimeter question. What is ADB and what does the organization do? Maybe we go to the results if that's possible. Julia, that would be great. Let's see what you guys came up with for the Asian Development Bank. It's actually quite interesting. It's Asian Development Bank, but we cover in terms of the countries we cover, it's Asia and the Pacific. So if you really look at it, it goes from Tbilisi, Georgia, all the way in the west to Fiji, Suva, many of the Pacific islands, and we also do have in many of these countries offices. Okay, so thank you very much for Julia for sharing this. I've seen only 18 responses so far. Some more there. Financing development, yes, we are bank and investor, an agency. Research. Actually, research we do not do. We do knowledge management or knowledge work. Research is actually our Asian Development Bank Institute, and actually quite interesting. Today we had the news that our Asia Development Institute has a new dean, and the new dean of that is actually an Indonesian national, the former minister of among others, former Minister of Finance, as well as the former Minister of Bappenas. So this is really exciting for us to announce that Pak Bambang Brojonegoro has been appointed as the ADBI Institute Dean in Tokyo. So that's our research side. So there's a lot of provide financial assistance. So improve quality of life, sustainable development. Yeah, this is lovely. Policy advocacy. I don't think we do that policy advocacy in the extent that you would expect from kind of knowledge institutions, but we really look at indeed particularly on topics such as climate change. We really want to be the climate bank of Asia and the Pacific, as well as looking at involvement of private sector financing. This is where we really want to push the agenda and allow for enhancement of attention from governments to this. But indeed, we are a bank, so thanks very much. It's good that it's still going. We provide financing to governments mainly. So that brings me also to the next slide, which is overview of ADB. So we were founded in 1966, so we will be almost 60 years soon. Indonesia was one of the first or the founding members. It's also the largest shareholder. So the bank is owned by different countries. We are based in the Philippines, and we are proud to be there in Asia. And so I can work for the ADB because I'm Dutch, and the Netherlands is one of the non-regional members of the ADB, allowing because we only hire people from our member countries. Indonesia is, in terms of employees, international employees in ADB, is punching below its weight. So we're always looking for good qualified Indonesian nationals to join our international staff. At the moment, I think we have about 15, 20 in Manila, but we can definitely, it would be great if to have more. So we provide financial assistance to its member. That's mainly through loans, but also grants and technical assistance. We promote regional cooperation, so between countries, particularly if you look in the Mekong Delta, but also in Central West Asia. And we provide knowledge and policy advice where that is, we feel there's topics of great importance. Next slide, please. So the difference between a commercial bank and a development bank is provided here. So a commercial bank, of course, you know what, your BRI, your Mandiri, your BTA, BRI. So this is often providing funds to small and medium enterprise, to individuals, to companies. But in our cases, we are really looking at also, and that is key difference, of course. For us, it's really about providing funding for projects which make an impact, social benefits or economic improvement, economic development, or climate impacts. Our target clients are the government, the public institutions. To some extent, we also have a private sector arm so we provide, for example, financing. We provided to Hermina hospitals and in the geothermal sector. We really have, we were established by a special act, the government, so there's a treaty, and we have, and we are able to provide funding because we are very stable and trustworthy. So for us, it's very easy to generate money at the international capital market, which we then can provide, we can lend out to our clients. And it's a long-term low interest. So most of our loans are paid back in, 20 years, 25 years with low interest. Next slide, please. Now, this is really a topic where I hope we get a lot of responses, and that is really on the topic of what makes a city lovable. So after talking about ADB a little bit, really the core of today is about what makes a city livable and how do you finance that. Lovability is a topic which we introduced it's not completely new. I mean, also this in Singapore, you have had some publications about. But lovability, what does that mean for you? What makes a city? What makes you love a city? What makes you feel connected to a city? So I'm very excited to see your responses on this, as well as maybe in the chat if you want to clarify anything more. That would be great because we really want to know what it is that you love about the city, particularly since these are the elements, of course, that we hope the future capital of Indonesia will also have those meet those criteria, meet these aspirations, so that it really is something where you would consider moving to Nusantara for because you love the city. And the way we came about this topic of lovability, actually in high school, I wrote a paper about my geography teacher. He had to write a paper, and I wrote a paper about New York. And I was intrigued by this T-shirts and bags they have with the I love NY, I love New York T-shirts. And what it is that people, because it was actually when I first visited New York, it was kind of a nasty city. This was in 1996, I think. There was still, the metro was not very, subway was not very pleasant to be. It was not very clean in many places. There was crime. But still, people are walking around with that bag or with that T-shirt that says, I love New York. And what makes people love that city? The concept of, and you see it now actually in many cities, yeah? I love Amsterdam. I don't know if there's a sign somewhere in Jakarta, I love Jakarta, yeah? But people go there to make a picture to put on the Instagram and so on, yeah? So this branding of I love a city, but what is that? Is that more than just this sign in front of an iconic building, or is there something more to it? So here I see walkability is coming up, fresh air, green spaces. good people, I like that. Human-centered, togetherness. So it's a sort of feeling of community. Wait, what else do I see? Good, yes, good people, beautiful scenery, the people, good environment, togetherness, friendly people. So yeah, child-friendly. This is really, I like the child-friendly one. I always think when you design a city which works well for children and elderly, it works for everybody in the community, in the city. If you design a city which is mainly for people like me, you know, I just turned 50, you know, and I'm relatively fit, you know, I can climb stairs and so on. That city works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. So, but if you have a child-friendly city, particularly as a topic I was reflecting on lately, on playgrounds, having people to you know, having quality playgrounds where people come together, where community come together, it's really something which is connecting and creating that sense of belonging. So walkability. I see there's in the chat a question about if there's a chance to introduce, self-introduce. I'm not the administrator indeed. Feel free to introduce yourself, Michael, in the chat, and then people can reach out to you either bilaterally or in the group. Feel free. I don't know what really the credits or what the modality should be, but I thank you for all these great ideas, and I do hope that we can reflect on that a little bit more as we go ahead. Coming back to the presentation, for us, it's actually this triangle which we wanted to talk about. So at the bottom of the triangle is the basic needs, just what you need to get a city. You know, you need roads, you need buildings, you need energy, you need, yeah, that's, you know, your basic things. Then the second element, the second layer above that is livability. And the livability is that, you know, it works. You know, the government works. It's a city where there's green spaces, there's, you know, as it says here, functional satisfaction. But the next layer, and that's really where we're looking for, is how to create, and particularly relevant for new cities, how to create this emotional attachment to a city, how to create a sense of community. By the way, one thing which I find interesting in the Mentimeter, which we did earlier, is none of you, and I had expected this from Indonesians, where food is such an important topic. Maybe I missed it, but I think how people connect to each other through food is really super important, besides playgrounds. So we get back to that later. But lovability really focuses on creating this emotional attachment between the city and its current or future residents, promoting a sense of pride, diversity, and excitement. So going to the next slide, again, so operationality of the city is really making the city work. Then livability is to that it functions, that you know, you can go from A to B and you feel like in general it's a nice place to be. But the next level is really that people are connected. And here's a picture of people coming together, watching a movie, or indeed elderly and children coming together. Again, a city for elderly and a city for the young works for everybody. So lovability goes beyond just livability. Thank you. We're switching gears again, and this is a bit of the more technical part on financing. So basically, there's two streams of how a city can finance itself: land-based financing and non-land-based financing. So starting with the land-based financing, these are everything what you can do to leverage the value of a land and property. So this is, for example, your property taxes. This is, for example, whenever somebody sells a property or a development right, and you sell it to somebody, or the city sells the development right. Land leasing. So, for example, Seoul is very good in that. The city of Seoul, where they actually the land is not owned by individuals, but it's on a long-term land lease arrangement. So every period people are paying first. Betterment charges. So these are charges which are so the government takes a land, improves that a little bit, and then indeed sells it at a higher price. And land value capture is this topic of, and there's a lot of literature on each of these topics again. But land value capture is where, for example, around the surrounding of a metro station, you see that the real estate prices, of course, are increasing. Now, a government can anticipate that by then that will also increase the revenue on that particular plot, or indeed really capture the increased value by selling it out or leasing it out. So this is really the land-based financing. The other side of the equation is non-land-based financing. These are the abilities to, for example, use your local government budget. And that, to a large extent, of course, includes revenue generated by local government, but also from the transfers they receive from central government. Municipal bonds, green bonds. So this is when your city can put a number of green projects, for example, together and go to the financial market and say, would you like to invest in these projects? And as a result of that, you will be able to, at some time, get some revenue out of these. Public-private partnerships, there's a lot of talk about that. Often public-private partnerships in Indonesia are unfortunately used in a way that, oh, we don't have government budget, let the private sector take care of that. That is quite challenging because in public-private partnerships, the private sector is really looking for a very balanced risk and reward. Yeah, so if the risks are too high and the reward is too low, the profit is too low, private sector will be very difficult to convince to engage in a public-private partnership. User tariffs and fees. So this is whenever you have a service delivered, whether it's if you have to go to the local government and pay for some, and then for something, and then loans. Now we as ADB cannot borrow directly to the to local governments. We can go, for example, through institutions such as PTSMI, so in Indonesia, in this case, it's only central government which can borrow from an institution such as us. But loans can come, for example, also from, as I said earlier, PTSMI or other enterprises where they take out loans in order to provide financing for the priority projects they envision. Now, this is really key, what I just said in terms of priority projects. It's about linking, finding the projects which are best for which financing option. So some projects are really good for public-private partnership. Some projects they are not generating any revenue, so you will need to indeed find other ways of using your APBN, so your local government budget, or borrowing for this. So that is really the kind of financing of a city, kind of 101, yeah. Very basic on this one. Next slide, please. For us, I talked a little bit about it. We can only, as it says here, we can only provide financing to the central government through sovereign lending. But so sovereign lending is when we borrow, for example, to the Ministry of Finance in Indonesia, which then provides money to the Ministry of Public Works. And with those funds, we, for example, currently are financing the construction of a wastewater treatment plant in Semarang. Non-sovereign lending, this is to, like I said earlier, to, for example, Hermina, but also here we are looking in Jakarta to provide financing to a Korean K-Water, which then in turn is financing Karian water supply system, where we are providing, which then has an agreement with the Ministry of Public Works to provide water to Jakarta. And then last one is something which we do as a third pillar, is helping cities to close deals on public-private partnerships. So, for example, in Denpasar, Bali, we are working with the local government to see to what extent you can get the private sector finance the street lighting. So making LEDs, improving street light coverage, but also making them more energy efficient. So the private sector is willing to do that because the government has been paying, for example, 100, and the private sector says, we can do this cheaper, but for the time being, the government keeps on paying 100, and This then goes to the private sector, which for them is a profit. But with that additional money, they can expand the coverage of the street lighting in the Pasar. Again, any questions? If I go too fast or too slow, please raise it in the chat box. On that note, I'll just continue then to the next slide. Traditionally, ADB, we are providing financing for sanitation, water supply. So we did that, for example, in Palu in response to the earthquake, tsunami, and liquefaction project. And we have a regional water supply project in the pipeline. So we don't do very much on really this planning side. I'd love to do more because this is really exciting. But of course, the government of Indonesia doesn't borrow from us for planning. In the end, they borrow for us, as you see here, for this new centralized water system, wastewater management system, citywide inclusive. These are substantial loans. Yeah, these are $420 million loans, and so. But that is really for improving the services in wastewater and sanitation. But again, there is one difference, and that is next slide, please. So this is another example of where we invest in urban, that is urban transport here in Jakarta. So we will be working together with JICA to finance the east-west extension of the current MRT system, which at the moment, of course, is only going north-south. So that's very exciting because it really makes this start to become a network of metro lines. So we are super excited, and this is really an area where this land value capture can also come in. Yeah. Next slide is on technical assistance. We have been working, for example, with the city of Makassar, where there is a lot of work done on trying to prepare this livable city plan, which included a lot of digital work because this was also during COVID, so we couldn't physically go there. So we used a lot of online platforms and Earth observation data to identify the current status of both service delivery, but also of the financing, and develop a tool to prioritize projects. And you can prioritize a project, for example, what the best benefits for the community, the best benefit for the environment, or the best benefit in terms of raising income. And we also complemented this with looking at how to then generate revenue. And a key topic there for the city of Makassar was improving its credit worthiness. So credit worthiness, if you have a bad credit rating, it is very challenging to borrow. Yeah, if you always have debts, it's very difficult to borrow new money. The same goes for cities. So what can the city of Makassar do if it has all these ambitions and all these hopes for providing projects for its citizens? Key is really to get its own house in order, to make sure that its books are balanced and that indeed it has a credit rating. So you can get a external agency come and provide a credit rating, and then that's A, B, B plus. You might have seen that. Now, the better the credit rating, the more confident that investors are in you, and as a result, your borrowing is cheaper. So it's cheaper for you to borrow. So we were playing around in trying to see to what extent this tool could be utilized also for other cities in Indonesia to improve its credit worthiness. Because the key is there, local governments accessing private financing or financing from other sources, borrowing. It's really important to have that confidence from the financiers. Next slide, please. So this is where it gets excited and where I take a sip of water. This is on Nusantara, capital city. Now, I've noted that the whole series has been, of course, about Nusantara, and some speakers might have spent more time on talking about Nusantara than others. For me, really, this is the case study also because we think that Nusantara capital city can really be, or it can really be a a testing ground for new approaches, for new methods, for new ways of doing things, including new ways of financing a city. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So this is nothing new for you who have been interested in Nusantara. So yeah, last week when we went, it's still a 2-hour flight to Balikpapan. It was a 1.5-hour drive on the new toll road. The new toll road is not completely finished. There's still patches which needs to be finished. So you get almost to the new airport, the airport which is open but not open yet for commercial flights. And then it's still from the new airport, it's another 45 minutes, I think, to the new capital. But you see large areas of land already being made ready for the toll road. And of course, it has to be seen what the recent budget restrictions will do in terms of finalizing those last parts of the road to the Nusantara. In total, it's a massive area, indeed 3 times larger than Singapore. Yeah, so. But what has been developed now is, of course, this KIPP, and within KIPP, it's really the first 900 hectares which have been developed. And it's really, actually, you can say a lot about whether the move of Nusantara is correct, whether it should have been done or not. You can debate that about this long and short. You can really debate about whether, you know, it should be prioritized to build the presidential palace, and now the plans to prioritize the development of the parliament and the judicial buildings. But fact is, if you stand there now and what has been achieved since 2022 in terms of construction, it's really mind-blowing. It is really very, very impressive. And next slide, if you look at it, it is actually a pleasant place to walk around. This core area, actually, I had the pleasure last week to bike around there with the ambassador of the Netherlands. It's a nice place. You can stay in a hotel already. You can go to Excelso. There are hospitals there. There are these. So what you see in the sides of the main corridor is the coordinating ministries. You already have also the apartments. I think about 40 plus towers have been built of 12 stories each. You have City Hall, so the OKN is on the construction. You have a really nice Veranda Nusantara. It's a kind of a viewing point, restaurant kind of thing. And you have this visitor center, an amphitheater. It's really quite exciting. And then from the other side, you see in the right-hand corner of the picture, of course, you've all seen that images of the palace, which is really big. I mean, we went inside and they even have a kind of a funicular which goes up. We went by, I think we had to go 3 times with a big escalator to go up to the top. Yeah, next slide, please. Now, this of course doesn't come cheap. Yeah, the whole idea is that as it was sold by President Jokowi at that time in 2022, when the law on the move of the capital was adopted, it was that about 80% would come from private and 20% would come from public sector. Now, that idea of this 20-80% combination, that is, of course, impossible to have from the very beginning onwards. You need to have some kind of capital in the new city before the private sector comes in. At the same time, I must really say that we have been super impressed by the level of investment so far from private sector, which goes beyond what I had expected. And I think it's really commendable to Nusantara Capital Authority in having been able to secure those commitments. Now, not all these commitments have turned into real projects yet. For example, there's been a lot of groundbreaking or ribbon cutting for example, the Nusantara International or Intercultural School, the International School of Nusantara. Now, that is not yet, there's not that, you cannot see any construction there, but they have indeed committed, they have land there. So far, about 4.4 billion US dollar or 72 trillion Indonesian rupiah have been allocated. But another 3.7 billion from private sector, as well as some commitments on public-private partnerships, and I'll go into that a little bit later. So overall, it's a whole lot of money, and it's about, at the moment, 50-50, yeah, that between private sector and public-private partnership, as well as state budget. And I think that is very commendable for a new city. We visited the hospital there. It's probably the fanciest hospital I've been to in Indonesia. And you look at then you look at what the potential has, it's really quite impressive. But then there's no road yet leading to that hospital, so the number of visitors is still very, very low. So let's hope that, you know, at least there's progress on connecting those private sector investments to the larger city. But the key here really is the question, not so much about how much budget in 2025 will come or the next 5 years. For me, it's the key is when will people be told to move there? When will this first civil servants be told to move there? Now, Pak Basuki said already, you know, we're moving everybody from OIKN there in March. That's a great step. But the key now is also the other civil servants and the level of those civil servants. So a lot has been done already. If you look at what has been built or what is in the process of being built, really impressive. The Swiss hotel, it's a 5-star hotel. It's not cheap. It's about 3 million per night. So that's about $220. It's definitely very expensive, I think. But at the same time, it's not an easy location because they have to ship everything in. People working there, they have to find, you know, houses, accommodation in the vicinity. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted to work there. Yeah. Next slide, please. So this is some pictures of the different or some logos of the different entities we've done the groundbreaking. Under Pak Jokowi, you might remember that he would come there once every month, yeah? And every month there would be a new groundbreaking of new entities coming in. Now this is really has slowed down. Pak Prabowo, as part of his presidency, has not been there yet. He has been, of course, to the 17th of August celebrations last year, which were then held at Nusantara. But yeah, he still needs to come to Nusantara. However, he has committed to budget to build the parliament and to build a judicial building. So, and he has also committed to moving the political capital in 2028, sometimes 2029, 2028. But anyway, around that. Next slide, please. So on this one, this is on how public-private partnerships work. For Nusantara, there's 2 projects really which are on top of the priorities for the public-private partnership scheme. One is the housing, so apartments. So there's a number of investors, including Intiland, Ciputra, and others who have expressed keen interest in providing housing and then be paid back in availability payment or rental schemes or something like that. And then the other one is for roads and multi-utility tunnels. So these are tunnels which are and new and renewable energy. So these are tunnels, among others, where you have the different cables and water supply which can run there. And also there, particularly on the renewable energy, Masdar is there. We do have a lot of international interest there. The speed at which this will develop will really depend on, indeed, as I said, this key indication, when will the first people move. But to have this commitment already is quite commendable. Next slide, please. One reason why hotels such as Nusantara, so this is Swiss hotel, Nusantara, this hospital I was referring to, and these other private sector entities are interested in financing Nusantara, is that the incentives as well as the ease of doing business are really very good, well designed. Nusantara Capital Authority has the authority and the mandate to be able to provide financing fiscal incentives as well as other incentives. So, for example, housing for investment will be arranged for foreigner workers. They're exempt from of compensation fees, which is always very difficult when expatriates come and work in Indonesia. There is land ownership, so no land and building acquisition fee. On the other hand, tax holidays, VAT and luxury good tax reduction, super tax reduction, customs. So there's all these kind of incentives. Next slide, please. And then also in a little bit more detail, it's about specific regulations which have been issued to further enhance the attractiveness. So if you come in the one of the boxes there, employees who work at IKN, their taxes are borne by the government. I mean, this is incredible, yeah. Companies that invest in IKN will be given a tax holiday with a term of up to 30 years. So if I would open any startup, I would really seriously consider looking at Nusantara, because the incentives are there really, really very convincing, yeah. So yeah, even for example, yeah, the bottom right corner, you see transactions for. So if you want to purchase an e-vehicle to use in IKN, you don't have to pay VAT. So this is quite amazing, yeah, the incentives put in. Next slide, please. Now, before we go on this in this case study, of course, we have a quick look at. Oh yeah, we'll do the questions later. Okay. Yeah, great. So let's go to the case study on initiating this livable and lovable. So here you see that my favorite triangle in the you remember at the bottom was basic infrastructure, livability, and then on top of it, lovability. We engaged with money from the Spanish government. We engaged ARUP consultants who also had a lot to do with the initial master planning of Nusantara, as well as a Spanish consultant to help Nusantara Capital Authority to identify this concept of, to formulate this concept of lovability and to prepare a prioritization framework, which we made a long list of projects, which we then were prioritized. And we had consultations with local people in the area of Nusantara, but we also had a big event in Jakarta at Pelataran Hutan Kota to discuss and prioritize those investments which really would make a difference to the lovability of Nusantara and the attractiveness of people to move there. And then we finalized it with looking at the social, economic, environment, and financial strategies to realize these different projects. Next slide, please. So some of these projects which we felt are important to consider is the Pancasila Park. On the left-hand side, you see testimonials of different potential residents of how they look at a park and why the park would be of interest to them and why the park would be a good investment. And then at the bottom, you see also some of the economic benefits, yeah, the health benefits, the environmental impact for greenhouse gas and air quality and greenhouse gas reduction, the urban green space, the public facilities, as well as the urban park facilities, helping to improve just in general its attractiveness of the city. So we made rough recommendations on design, rough recommendations on what that park could look and feel like. Next slide, please. Another recommendation, a culinary center. Again, it's really bringing people together, and that's what I like. One of the things I like about Singapore are these hawker centers, yeah, where people love to come together. And if there's one thing which brings people together, it's definitely food. So again, what are the benefits for potential future residents, and what are the economic benefits of such an investment, and how does that come together to create a city which people would like to live in and like to connect to? Next slide, please. Another is some forest rehabilitation and botanical garden. Again, similar to the the park, but this is really to create a and I must say that actually the design of Nusantara as it is now already, Ican now already, there's a lot of interesting areas there. But this is really to look at a bit more like similar to what you have in Singapore, the botanical gardens, what you have also as part of Central Park in New York, botanical gardens, looking at in general attractiveness. And then it comes down to forest rehabilitation. It's really, and I need to remind participants that the core of the idea of Nusantara is really to build and rehabilitate the city and the forest. So really very exciting to see that the government is committed, OIKN is committed to increasing current forest coverage from 45% to 65%. Next slide, please. Ecotourism, that relates to that reforestation also. What makes people want to, come there? There's a lot of green area available there. So how to make that, put investments in so that people are really able to enjoy that nature, to really enjoy the ability to go bird watching, hiking, etc. So instead of having to sit, 1.5, 2 hours to go to Sentul here, what can the Nusantara capital offer for such kind of outdoor leisure? Thanks. Next. And then the last one is this Smart Villages Network Initiative. So really, again, being able to create a community, sense of community. What can create bringing people together, and how does it contribute to the sense of community? And here I know there's a lot of you who are students. I really think that one of the things which the government should do as quickly as possible, open universities or education opportunities for students. And then I talk about university. University students are less bound to a certain location, but they bring a lot of vibrancy to an area. They bring a lot of even, they will set up small cafes, etc., etc. So I think that is really an investment which would be really important to undertake. So coming that together is to create that sense of villages, that sense of community. All right, and then I move to the last slide before going into the discussion. So here we have, what we did was looked at each of these proposals, and you see here some more. There's, for example, also a package 4 is a cultural center, yeah. And then we looked at, so for example, for this Pancasila Park is what are the financing options? And what does the for the development? So that is that's the capital expenditure. So what does it need in order to construct this? And what for the operation of the infrastructure? And what are then the pros and the cons? So we looked at different ways of financing this. Now, luckily for the park, for example, I understand some financiers have been found. Culinary, I'm not sure where it stands, but I think that there's massive potential for private sector there. And then, of course, forest rehabilitation. This is something which hopefully with carbon credits can be done as this really benefits the aspiration of the city to be a smart, sustainable forest city. Cultural center. I think it's a bit too early to have that financed by the private sector, but so probably you come to a government initiative there first, and then see how later maybe the operation can move into private sector. On that note, that is what I wanted to share with you on ADB, on lovability, and on financing a city, and then the case study of Nusantara, Loveable City. Thank you very much, and I guess back to Ibu Wiwin, but I also see some questions here. Given the recent set of events affecting financing, sorry, now Blah, 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 blah. Given the recent set of events affecting financing on the USA, would ADB be affected by Trump policies? That is the question, which really doesn't really have to do a lot with today's session, but thanks for raising it anyway. So ADB owns 15 Lima Blas percent of the ADB. So they're 50% shareholder. That's equal to Japan. So Japan also has 15%. Now, so that is it's a big shareholder. It's not the biggest because they shared it with Japan. But the government of Trump, the Trump administration, has initiated a review of its contributions to multilateral development banks such as ourselves, World Bank, African Development Bank, etc. And I guess that will take time to reconsider that. At this stage, we haven't heard anything. That is guessing. But even, it's 15%. I think what will happen in the unlikely event, and I don't want to again speculate, but in the unlikely event of Trump saying, we have to pull back from ADB, that other financiers will step in to fill that gap. We've actually recently gone through a reorganization which helps that for every dollar we have in our, because normally you use your own capital to raise funding from the capital market, yeah. So we have now put in a system which allows us that the dollars we have in our institution, we can actually raise more dollars from the capital market. So we've recently expanded our ability to borrow. I don't think there's going to be very quickly any impact. But there's a general trend, of course. I mean, if Trump says, we shouldn't be doing working on climate anymore, that does have an impact for sure. Okay, wait, where are we? And then there was a question from DJ Clario. How could we allow society emotional in defining the livable city from urban development investment that is processed by government? There's any assessment criteria and procedure to measure the livable stages with investment as one of the key points. I'm not sure if I 100% understand this question, so maybe you want to further clarify in the discussion here. But my understanding is that, yes, to create a connection to a city, to create a feeling of belonging, to create community, that will take time. And at the moment, if you ask me, so if the government of Indonesia, and again, this is my personal opinion, not ADB opinion, not the government of Indonesia opinion. Of course, financing the parliament, financing the construction of the parliament, financing the construction of the houses for the parliamentarians, financing the judicial court. From a symbolic point of view, it's very important. From a point of view of getting the city ready to become the capital of Indonesia, the political capital of Indonesia, is very important. But those investments are not giving you the things which make a city, yeah. That is then just it's a combination of buildings. It's a combination of structures, and a city is much more than a combination of buildings. It's a combination of people and all the mess and issues which come with that. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can follow up on that. Thank you, Joris. I'm more clear now why urban planners are kind of fundamentally struggling with urban finance as a topic in general, because it kind of flies in the face of some of our most fundamental principles. Certainly when we're dealing with a city that's planned from scratch, we kind of bump into the reality of society engineering, which is kind of a harsh way of saying we need to have a lovable city to attract people, and we don't really know how. And more in your field, maybe economy engineering. How do you achieve a viable economic market in a place that had nothing before. That seems historically almost impossible or takes several generations. So those two fundamental obstacles, how do you see Nusantara in that perspective?
I think this is thank you very much for that comment, and well, this is super important indeed. And that's why I've been so surprised by how private sector at all till date has been able to make commitments in financing. I mean, out of what do you commit substantial funds to build a hotel there? That is just because, of course, the hope that people will move there and the financial fiscal incentives, but also, of course, there was political pressure. And now that political pressure is now much less. And that puts the experiment and the attraction of private sector, which is very important, again, this 20-80% at risk. The messaging which is happening at the moment is really quite challenging, I would say, for investors' confidence. But Papazuki and team is doing everything in their power as chairman of the Nusantara Capital Authority to continue to sell that message of, come and invest here. But at the same time, it should be noted that Papazuki is, of course, a public works guy who always worked with national budget, and as such was always, he didn't really have that private sector. It takes a bit longer sometimes, it's complicated, and so let's just use government budget. And of course, with Pak Jokowi as president, that was a very comfortable position for him to be in. Now this is actually a new kind of business line. The key again will be who will move and when will they move. So who will they move? So one of the ideas I heard is that they're going to use the capital for, there's been apparently a lot of new recruits in government. So this is as a kind of a long boot camp kind of thing, they being put there in Nusantara. Maybe they're still single, not yet with families, because actually elementary school is not there yet. So that could be one way, but that is not making the city really the capital. It's only the moment that ministers are actually physically moving there, echelon 1 and so on are moving there. This is really important that the right people are moving. As a planner, what can you do to create a city? And I saw another comment here in the group is, indeed, of course, how can you plan for a city? And I think that comment very much. How can you plan for a city, Ruku, if you don't involve the people who are going to actually move there? So that's why we use these fictitious characters of these fictitious. So we say, okay, elderly people, a younger civil servant, a more senior civil servant. So we try to think about going through their day-to-day routines and what is it that would make a city meet that day-to-day routines expectations. So these fictitious characters were very helpful for us to define what kind of infrastructure is required. Thanks.
But that leaves me still wondering, what you described earlier, we would call that critical mass, right?
Yes.
The city needs a critical mass to kind of switch from the infinite drip of the government to kind of become self-sustainable, economically self-sustainable. And I'm curious where that critical mass, that point is exactly, and what kind of diversity would you really need to achieve in order to reach that point?
Yeah. So at the moment, in terms of critical mass, so one of the more, and then it's about private sector investment. Yeah. So under these ministry buildings, there are spaces for small businesses. Now, Excelso coffee shop has taken the best location. And they are operating, it's the meeting place in town at the moment. And that's where community is created. But if you, for example, want to build a large shopping center, that critical mass is definitely not that. That will come over time. Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time. And for my general observation as somebody who's also looked, of course, at other experiments of new capitals, whether it is Canberra, Naypyidaw, Washington, D.C., Brasilia, Astana, these are, of course, it takes a long time. Even Canberra, now it's I think over 150 years. And it starts to become actually what I hear from people who live there. It actually is a very pleasant city, but it always had this reputation of being boring and so on. What went wrong with Brasilia is that they planned, and I really hope that this can be avoided in Nusantara. So they planned the capital city really well, the core of the city really well, the parliament, the judicial buildings, as well as the executive buildings. But then they kind of gave up. And now Brasilia is surrounded by one of the largest slum areas of Brazil. And it's really, it's grown beyond its limits. It's grown, again, it's also a city similar to Nusantara in one of the core lungs of the world. Yeah. So you have, of course, Kalimantan, Borneo rainforest, you have Central Africa, Congo as a lung of the world, and then you have the Amazon. Now, opening up Nusantara without proper planning, continuous planning, yeah? You cannot plan for everything now. You shouldn't plan for everything now, but you need to really have your boundaries very clear and to ensure that you remain that compact city. Because if there's something which we learned from Asian cities and governance, that it's really difficult to contain cities. Cities are spreading. I mean, you living in Bali, and you know how it is. This is like continuous spread of the and taking over of rice fields by villa development and so on. So how can this Nusantara be contained? And I hope that future planners joining in this evening are really saying, okay, I want to be involved in this planning of the new city. And it's not just planning, yeah, it's about enforcing of planning. That's where Indonesia is often challenged, I think. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, ironically, the slums or the favela around Brasilia are also what gives life to the city and in a way has saved the city. And in previous talks in this series, it was kind of a reoccurring theme that the social housing and somehow incorporating local communities was one of the critical factors to move a new city into a realm of sort of permanence and make it a viable proposition.
Yeah. So on that note, I think what is being offered now to civil servants moving to Nusantara are these apartments, which are 95 square meters. These are very nice apartments and probably better than what many have access to in Jakarta. So again, indeed, it's the individual decision, which is based on, will I have a better accommodation? Will I have a more access to green space? Will I have, what does this do to my children in terms of education, my opportunities, my quality of life in general? And that equation is not yet there yet. As I said, one of the key missing links, I think, really is the elementary schools. That is really what needs to happen fairly quickly. There's private sector elementary schools, but those are probably too expensive for many moving in. Yeah, thanks.
Interesting point. I was also really intrigued by your slide on ecotourism, and I almost imagine the next slide would be ecosystem services, which is at the heart of the competition's brief. This idea that the 70% green space has to somehow generate its own revenue stream. Through food production, through indeed ecotourism, through material production, wood, etc. So I'm really keen to hear from an investor / bank perspective if that becomes can become a cornerstone of the whole business case.
Yeah, I definitely think so. If you look at, in general, reforestation can provide carbon credits. Carbon credits can be traded. Even on our side, so if a government comes to us and says, "Oh, we want to borrow for roads," we'll finance, that road for a certain percent. But if they say, "Hey, we want to borrow for reforestation," all of a sudden the cost of borrowing is low because we can blend that with a very concessional financing. Yeah. And I really think that given the vastness of the land allocated to Nusantara and under the mandate of the Nusantara Capital Authority, which a lot of it later will be, is hoped to be 65% indeed forest, this really should be a source of revenue besides what you mentioned. Yeah, so agro, forestry, ecotourism, but definitely also just the pure fact of carbon offsetting. Yeah, so international companies, whether you are building a large data center, yeah, these data very energy intensive data centers. Now people can offset, or companies can offset this by investing in reforestation. Yeah, and that can generate money to create a better city. Thanks.
I don't see any new questions. No, I don't think. I think you guys covered it really well. You have a beautiful system in place. That's wonderful. Prof. Wiwi, if you have follow-up questions, please do jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I have quite another kind of questions. Yeah, I want to know, based on your experience, yeah, two things, Pak Joris, maybe like an important lesson learned from the case of Indonesia, when you do in some cities, yeah, and what is the key lesson learned that you think important for Indonesia in financing their development? Most importantly, I want to know more on, as you know, Indonesia, we have a complex system between national, subnational, provincial, city, and also the kabupaten, right? I just want to know some notes from you in general. I do not specify my question to Nusantara, but yeah, general questions based on your experience in Indonesia.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. So focusing on cities and what local governments can do to enhance their ability to implement projects and finance projects which are important for the livability and lovability of their cities. I think there's three things they need to really look at. First of all, and I mentioned this earlier already, they need to get their own house in order. So you need to be able to really justify. So if you have a budget, to be able to very clearly communicate that, so it's transparency about the budget, how it's being used, how it's being prioritized, and being very selective in what you are financing. Because this allows you to, in general, improve your creditworthiness, as I said. Yeah. So that is, first, get your house in order in terms of your expenditures. Second of all, get your house in order in terms of revenue. There's actually a lot of streams of revenue which local governments could generate, but which for political reasons they are not generating. So because local parliament say, no, let's not raise the tariffs. No, let's keep it. As a result of that, one example of that one is parking fees. Now, parking fees in Indonesia are ridiculously low, particularly since if you park on a street, actually what you're building an expensive street, and then you're putting a car there, taking up that important space on the street, and you charge very, very little money for that. It should be the other way around. We should charge high because it's a public area, and then with that money to provide a good alternative, public transport, and so on. But these are political decisions. But expenditures make sure you make that transparent. Revenue, make sure to see what you can maximize there. And then lastly, do play that, I refer to the game, or do really engage to find ways to indeed work with partners. The traditional way of financing in Indonesian cities is go to Jakarta and minta uang, yeah? Can you borrow me for this? Can you give me money for this project? Can you give me money for this project? Now, that game of partnership has to go beyond just going to Jakarta. In Jakarta at the moment, anyway, the wallet is closed at the moment, yeah? So this will force people to be more creative, or force cities to be more creative and engage with the private sector. How can we work together to make this city more interesting? Now, for example, if an investor wants to really build a shopping mall, yet another shopping mall, you could, as local government, you could say, okay, private sector, that's great, you're making a shopping mall. However, we want you in front of the shopping mall, we want you to make a public area. So, for example, in Jakarta, I think where they've done this really well is in this shopping center, Sarina, yeah? In front of it is now one of the most dynamic areas of the city. Everybody comes there in the evening. So you as a local government, you might not have a lot of money, but you are the one providing the permit. And as you do that permit, you can say, okay, you want to develop housing here? Make sure there is public, there's private, or there's public space for public engagement. Make sure there's a high quality playground there. Or indeed, I gave the example of the mall. You could think about many ways that you can negotiate. So play that game of partnership really well. I think that is super important, Ibu.
Yeah. Thank you. It's very important highlights, Pak. It reminds me, you mentioned in one of your slides about land value captures. I think that approach is not very much elaborated yet in Indonesia, right? So the non-conventional funding mechanism, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe before, I don't know if there's some other questions, some quick comments about land value capture from you, because you mentioned also in one of your slides.
Yeah. So this is the beauty of Indonesia, yeah? So we actually do have a very good legal system already for land value capture. It's already there. There's regulations. But until now, I think very few cities, Brani, yeah, they dare to do it. Because one of the things when it comes to implementation in Indonesia of any innovation, people are held back because of the fear of auditors coming to tell, oh, you cannot do this, or this is wrong, or whatever. So the BPK cloud, which is hanging over every potential project, is really instilling a lot of fear. But land value capture is an opportunity to anticipate the increase in property value by providing, for example, access to private services, to public services, whether it's transport or whether it's a road or something, and to see really how, so as a result of that, the real estate in those areas will increase, the value of the real estate will increase. As a result, the tax which can be raised on those plots can be captured, yeah? So you can increase then also the ability to raise revenue. For example, in Hong Kong, the entire MRT system there is actually financed not by the government, but it's financed by the stations which are built and the real estate which are built on top of the stations in order to be able to then finance the further expansion of the rail network. Now, so the station, and I'm always surprised, I take the MRT almost every day here in Jakarta, and I'm surprised by the low quality of real estate surrounding the stations, particularly on Fatmawati, Jalan Fatmawati, yeah? There's still a lot of bangkals, garages, there's still a lot of, cheap stores. Well, by now, these are, right next to the MRT station, like you would see in Singapore. This is where the most expensive real estate is. So that mindset, we hope that the expansion of the East-West line that there will be opportunities to experiment more with this and really set some examples. Because while the regulatory system is placed, people don't dare yet. But once you've done it a couple of times, we hope it will take off. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak, because I'm asking these questions because most of the participants here, most of them are, I think, urban planners and designers, and we haven't really touched the financing issues in depth. So your highlight must be very helpful for all of us here to understand more on the aspect. So yeah, Neville, I think it's almost 9. We can end our session now. Or please, if you have some final remarks before.
I have many more questions for you, Joris, and I really enjoyed it. It was very insightful and demystifying for us planners to hear the financing perspective. It's really pleasant. I would propose that we park those questions and bring them to the upcoming event that you may not know our central part in, and that's at the Erasmus House, of course. So from my side, I would say we see you very soon again.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that. And I just want to end with Prof. Wewin and Pak Neville. The role of urban planners is super important, of course, not just to plan a city, but also whatever the city is, how the plan is how the city is planned makes a massive difference in terms of how the city can be financed. So having an urban planning curriculum at a school without talking about the competency of what it needs to finance a city. In the end, if you look at the city, like Jakarta or any city, 90% of the city is financed by private sector, by real estate, by big companies and they are creating the skyline of Jakarta. It's not the government who's creating the skyline. It's the private sector who creates that skyline. But there is a lot to gain from understanding the motivations of those private sector investors. Because if you are in a good partnership with them, and if you are being able to align or set the rules at least, and understand the game they're playing, and they understand the game they have to play, you are in a much better position to gear those investments in the direction that you want to see as a planner. So I think, doing a role play at some time of you standing in the shoes of a real estate developer, wanting to develop a new apartment or a new mall or, another shop, and for planners to understand that is super important, because then you can start because in the end, the planners and the local governments are the ones who are setting the rules. You guys are designing the city, but you need to be able to contain that money stream of funds which comes from private sector. Thanks.
That's a very powerful and rather optimistic way to end this session, I think. Prof. Wiwi, would you like to close?
Yeah, please feel free to jump in if I forgot something. I just want to again say very high appreciations for you, Pak Joris. Thank you very much for these very nice presentations, and I hope we can continue next month, if I'm not mistaken, sometimes in the mid of March in Erasmus Host, when we will have the exhibition from our registered participants, the big 6, if I'm not mistaken. And this might also be our final lecture series, Pak Neville. We have all recorded all the series, and you can check on our website and also in Epoch website. I hope all the series and this very impressive last lecture series will give a fruitful ammunition for the participants for the competitions, and also all other participants who join the lectures. And anything else you would like to say, Pak Neville?
No, just thank you very much, and can't wait to see you again soon.
Okay, thank you
Thank you
again,
very much.
Pak
Thank you
Joris,
very
Bu
much for the
Yulia, and
opportunity.
all our participants tonight. Thank you, Pak Neville and Pak Roko.
Good night.
Selamat malam.
Selamat malam, makasih banyak. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.